Latch the windows, lock the doors, and put the kids to bed. It's time for another episode of
Tales from the Garage!
Hey folks, I'm back again. A couple days ago, I recorded 2 episodes of Tales from the Garage, out of boredom, I guess, back to back, pretty much, like, I don't know, 6 hours apart or something like that. And that was maybe like 36 hours ago or so. So last night, which was probably another 6 to 8 hours after the previous episode, I came in here and did another one, which you are not going to see. And when I was done recording it, I selected 4 albums on that one, actually. And when I played back the video, the audio was fine, but the video kept freezing, so you got a shot of me every like 5 seconds or so. I hope that was just a little glitch, and it's not a sign that this old Windows 7 computer is dying, because I don't know if you remember, but the computer in my bedroom, the webcam no longer records. And it's not a fault of the webcam. I don't think it's a fault of the webcam software. Well, as much as it's stopped being able to record, even though visually it works and I could take still frame pictures. It stopped being able to record right after a Windows 10 update. So I guess the Logitech company isn't supporting this older webcam anymore or something, you know, due to the Windows 10 updates or whatever, but it's been a number of months now. So I don't know what I'm going to do when the cold weather sets in and it's too cold for me to be out here. So anyway, I guess with the fact that my last video didn't come out was, you know, the universe saying to me, Tails schmales, enough of this stuff already. So I didn't try to go back and re-record. All 4 records that I selected, I just kind of put back at random in the back in the vinyl pile. Some good ones came out of there. So I'm just going to start again, and hope if you haven't yet, you will subscribe to my other channel, G Lee, which I will leave a link for, which is in the future going to be where all my personal videos go. And I'm up to, I think, is it 21 or 23 subscribers out of the 1,000 plus that I need. But, you know, whatever. So here I go. I'm going to select some random vinyl once again, because I'm too damn lazy to talk about the stuff I've been listening to. Okay. I saw this red cover and I'm like, I gotta get that one. And the last vestiges of the price tag is just about ready to fall off. This is interesting because it's kind of, I'm just bought this in a record store. I recognize the record store by the label. This is one of those albums that, here's another label that doesn't exist anymore. I think my entire record collection consists of labels that don't exist anymore. The Lifestyle label, which I believe was based in Canada, but they did have a company that did the distribution for them here in the U.S., so they technically weren't imports. I always liked that very simple label, but I always liked it. Thilo von Westerhagen and band, Pleasureland. This is the only album, I believe, of theirs that came out, of his or theirs. I think this is the only actually official album that was recorded and released in the United States. Like I said, on this Lifestyle label, which was very short-lived. Now, when I bought this was another blind buy, as I did, you know, at that time, this would have been probably 84, I want to say. Yeah. Well, the record came out in 84, but I pretty much bought it when it came out. And I think the reason I bought it, it looked interesting. I love the cover. It reminds me of the Keith Jarrett Survivors Suite album cover, which is one of my favorite Jarrett albums. But it looked interesting, and I knew Lifestyle because I had several things on Lifestyle, especially the very... See, my computer's doing it again. It's doing that freezing thing. I had... what's the name now? I can't think of the band. Craig Payton and Ben Verdery. Latitude. I had the first Latitude album, which I really liked. And I think I had a couple other Lifestyle things. So I continued on and took a look at this when I saw this in the bins. No way to sample it. This is 1984 after all. So Thilo von Westerhagen. Well, the instrumental combo. I mean, I'm more of a fan of smaller bands. This is a 6-piece band, but it looked really interesting. It looked kind of ECM-ish, and it's as a matter of fact, just a couple years ago, I'm like, I really have to try to get this on CD. The CD had been out of print for years. I hate buying used CDs, but I did find a used copy, and so it was really the first time in like 30 years I got to hear the album. As a matter of fact, I put it up on Cosmic Pickle page, the whole album. It's a very easy to get into album. There's nothing kind of experimental or avant-garde. By the musician listing, it kind of looks like an ECM album in terms of instrumentation, but it really isn't. It's a lot lighter and easier to get into. Not smooth jazz, but fairly short pieces. There's only one piece that is even over 5 minutes on here, and that's the last track called "Kite Flying." And so Thilo von Westerhagen, who I'm not sure, I think he's still around. I want to get more by him, but there's a very limited number of things available. Mostly imports, I think mostly out of print stuff. He is a keyboard player, and on this, interestingly, doesn't play any synthesizers, plays piano, celesta, and organ. That's probably what interested me, because at this time synthesizers are very prominent, and he's not like an acoustic purist because he's playing the organ on here. So I thought with he's got an upright bass player. None of these musicians are anybody I've ever heard of. A drummer, percussionist, a marimba player, and vibes, which really, that's the thing that probably caught my attention, is having marimba and vibes in with this keyboard mix. An electric guitarist who also doubles on percussion, and a sax player. So you've got 6 musicians: sax, electric guitar, marimba, vibes, keyboards, including electric keyboards, bass, and drums. Sounds like a very interesting instrumental combination, and it is. It's very light, airy, and easy, and for once you can actually hear this for yourself. I really, really like this album, even though it's... a lot of people find it too light and easy, even though I like it better than like any smooth jazz I've ever heard. Smooth jazz to me is much more in the commercial pop music mode than this is. This is kind of like a how would you describe it? Like a European version of smooth jazz almost. There's another sensibility there. There's none of the funkiness that American smooth jazz has. And for years, I can remember when I bought this album, and even though I forget the name of the record store, I can remember its exact location. I still drive by there all the time. It was a fun store to shop at, as small as it was. It was a chain here. It wasn't an independent store, but it had big glass front windows. So, if you were there in the daytime when it was sunny out, the sun kind of shone into the whole record store. It was a nice vibe. Some record stores, or a lot of them, are almost like tombs. There's like no windows. But this was nice. You could kind of look out the window, and it was on a major highway, same highway I used to work right off of. And I'd be in there going on like a Saturday and flip through things for a couple hours and take a look. I could see the traffic, how bad the traffic was in the highway, which is right outside the window. And if it got bad, I'd just say, I guess I'll stay here another hour until the traffic lets up a little bit. But I like this. Go on my Cosmic Pickle page. Seek this out. I really like it. Carm was less enthusiastic about it. And our tastes are very, very spot on 99% of the time. But I like it. I can't help it. Back there. Did I mention I'm pulling another one? Ooh, here's one. Here's another short-lived label. This one an American label. Elektra Musician. I believe started by Bruce Lundvall. Bruce Lundvall was a big deal in the record company industry, and I guess he worked in a lot of the more commercial areas, but he had a love for jazz, so he would always kind of have a jazz division. If he worked for a big record label, there was always a jazz segment to what he did. And I recall one label that he worked at, one of these big labels, I can't remember, like a Capitol Records or something like that he worked at, that had a jazz segment to them. And he was in there, and I guess he was largely responsible for the label having a jazz segment to it. And when he left the company, they simply just basically didn't renew any of the contracts of any of the jazz artists that recorded for them. And I remember it was weird because all of a sudden one year, just before Christmas, this label put out all these best of albums. Steve Kahn was one of them, the guitarist. I think, was it Return to Forever was another one? I forget. They had a similar cover design. And all these best ofs came out. And I'm like, gee, they're really cashing in this Christmas. And then I realized that all these artists that they were putting these best of albums out, they basically canceled their contracts and said, you don't record for us anymore. We don't have a jazz division. And it was a big record label. I can't remember which one, still around. Like an Epic Records or somebody like that. And I think that was largely because Bruce Lundvall had left this record company and went on and started working for somebody else. And they're like, well, we don't have anybody to run the jazz division, and jazz doesn't make us any money, so let's just ditch these guys. Well, I believe Bruce Lundvall was pretty much, I believe, the guy behind the establishing of this Elektra Musician, which was a division of Warner Communications, who was huge back then. And for whatever reason, again, he didn't stick around, and it seems like as soon as he departed Elektra Musician, they did the same thing, and they said, like, it's jazz, it doesn't make any money. But they put out a bunch of really good albums, including, this was essentially Charles Lloyd. This is the first album I ever had by him. Charles Lloyd Quartet, an album called Montreux 82, which was recorded live in Montreux. And this was a bit of a comeback because Charles Lloyd had semi-retired from making albums. He was always making music, but apparently sometime in the 70s, he kind of started, he stopped recording for like major jazz labels. And even though he did some music, it was like private releases, and I think like music for meditation, if I'm not mistaken, that kind of thing, but not out and out like jazz releases. And he tells the story now. Michel Petrucciani plays piano on this, and he tells the story of how he met Michel, and it was Michel that was really responsible for him kind of coming back into the limelight and wanting to be on a major label and record kind of jazz music again, and music more out there for the public. Now, Michel has since passed away, I'm sure. A guy named Sunship Theus on drums, who I'm not familiar with at all, but the great bass player Palle Danielson, who played on quite a few ECM recordings. Great bass player. I always forget about him when I'm thinking of great bass players. Palle Danielson should definitely be in there, and he's one of those guys I tend to forget about. So sound-wise, it's Charles Lloyd on flute and tenor sax, recorded live in '82. Michel Petrucciani on acoustic piano, Palle Danielson on upright bass, Sunship Theus on drums. So it's piano, sax, bass, and drums, but a really, really good album, and very well recorded for a live album. Now, because of the vinyl limitations, and this didn't come out on CD, initially at least, it was not quite the CD age when this came out, and missing by a couple of years. I remember there was one track that, because of its length, they couldn't include on the album. And I think that one additional track, which would have been like a 10 or 12 minute thing, if they had been able to include it on here, would have been the whole performance, the whole set that Charles Lloyd played at this Montreux, kind of his coming back into the public eye. And there was a live recorded jazz show on like the NPR stations. And I remember shortly after this album came out, they got a hold of the one track that wasn't on the album, which, to the best of my knowledge, was never ever released anywhere. And they actually played it on their radio program. It might have been something like Jazz Alive or a program like that. And for some reason, of course I decided to record it. For some reason I recorded it on a reel-to-reel tape. So how the hell am I going to transfer that to anything? I don't know why I did that. And of course I got rid of the reel-to-reel player. So even if I had the tape, I wouldn't have anything to play it on. I have a different reel-to-reel player back there, but that's an 8-track reel-to-reel player, where the one that I had that I got rid of for lack of space was considered a 4-track. So now I know the reel-to-reel in terms of quality, in terms of the days back in the LP, vinyl, 8-track, and cassette days, reel-to-reel was actually the best sounding medium. If you recorded something on reel-to-reel, it actually sounded much better than any of those other 4 formats, which I think was my thinking behind taking this one incredibly rare track and recording it on reel-to-reel, and then not thinking about, I guess I was thinking, well, I could transfer it to cassette or something, but I never did. And then, of course, the tape got lost. So this has been out of print for a lot of years. This would be a prime, like I said, I don't know if this ever came out on CD. This would be a prime one to be re-released on CD with that extra, with that one track that was left off for time considerations. An Electro Musician did a kind of nice packing job, a little bit aping the ECM thing where they showed just on the actual sleeve that the record's in some of their new releases. I want to say they were only around for a couple of years, and I'm looking at these, and it's amazing the number of ones that I have. There's an Eric Gale album which I have, a Steps Ahead album, which was the first album under the name Steps Ahead, which I have. Bill Evans' Paris concert, which I have one of the volumes of. Chick Corea, again and again. That's one of Chick's albums I actually like. A weird kind of like semi-electric, but not really a fusion album. The Charles Lloyd album, Ron Carter's Etudes, which is a really good album. Bill Evans on saxophone, Art Farmer, and Tony Williams. That's a really good album. Chico Freeman, Tradition in Transition, which is another album I have. I have like 70% of the ones they show on here. Jimmy Smith, Off the Top. Good album. Wish I had that on CD. George Benson, Ron Carter, Grady Tate and drums, and Stanley Turrentine. Wow, the memories. Yeah, 82, man, I can remember buying this. And that's like 100 years ago now. Okay. Ugh. Have I not pulled out an ECM? I shouldn't have said that. So I just say, I haven't pulled out an ECM. What do? I pulled out an ECM. This is like the top. This is like the top of the top, though, of ECM. Here's Keith Jarrett. Definitely in my top 5 Keith Jarrett albums. Arbor Zena, or Xena, recorded October 1975. Keith Jarrett did a bunch of albums. He's done a lot of solo keyboard albums, or solo albums of him just playing various instruments. He's got his groups and quartets and etc. that people are very familiar with. And then he's got his lesser-known compositional orchestral albums, often written for like string orchestras and things like that. And sometimes he plays on those. Sometimes he doesn't even play on those. They're just like classical pieces written for him. One was an album for string section and Jan Garbarek saxophone, but Keith Jarrett himself didn't play on it. For a lot of people, this is the one most listenable, and I gotta I got to admit, it certainly it goes down the easiest. It's easy to follow. This is one of his more compositional albums, but he does play piano throughout the album. So he's got the piano and a string orchestra with him. But there's not really long sections of the string orchestra there where the piano's not. And in addition to him and the string orchestra, he's got Charlie Haden on bass and Jan Garbarek on saxophones. So it's this little kind of this trio of piano, saxophone, and bass with a string orchestra. But I gotta say, this is, I don't know if you want to call it accessible, because it's not avant-garde. A lot of his classical things can get kind of avant-garde. This is pretty. This is downright pretty. Though how accessible it is when you've got a piece that's almost 28 minutes long taking up side 2. And side 1 is a 15-minute piece and like a 10-minute piece. So there's only 3 pieces, but this is a gem. This is one of those that you put it on, and even though it's 50 some odd minutes, it really goes by fast. And the music is like the cover, but is that news for an ECM album? I guess not. But doesn't that look like John Abercrombie's Timeless now that I think about it? So recorded in October '75. This would have come out in '76. It would have taken me several years to pick it up. I probably didn't even get this till '79, '80 or so. Absolute class. Actually, considering the price, $7.99 at Discomat. This is probably among the last purchases that I would have made before the CD era kicked in, because I certainly went out and bought this on CD, no doubt about it. It's quiet. There's no percussion. I'm wondering if this is online. I bet you this is online now, because a lot of the ECM stuff that used to not be on YouTube or used to get kicked off of YouTube has been put up. This is one of those you got to hear this album before you die kind of thing. An absolute classic, definitely in his top 5. A lot of people might even put this as number 1 or 2. It certainly makes my top 5 of Keith Jarrett recordings. Okay, I'm going to pull one more. Will it be an ECM? Yes, it's an ECM. Another good one, Jan Garbarek Adventure with an E. Another one, I really highly rate this album. And because the cover's so dark, it's impossible for me to read. Let me see. So it's got a dark gray cover with black lettering. Recorded, it looks like December 1980, which would make sense. This is kind of in between his, most of his albums at this time, he had a quartet or a quintet. A pretty standard 4-piece band with drums, keyboards or guitar or both, bass, that kind of thing. And this was a bit of a diversion, and an interesting diversion. And I sometimes I tend to forget about this one, but I definitely put this in amongst his best too. An unusual, really unusual trio. You got Jan Garbarek on saxophones. He's still playing a little bit of flute here. I think he stopped playing the flutes around 82 or 83. So this came out in, like I said, I think what I'm reading here is December 1980. Sounds like it was recorded in, which would have come out in 81, and I would have bought it pretty much when I first saw it. It's got the great Nana Vasconcelos, the late great, actually, Nana Vasconcelos, doing all kinds of percussion. And just percussion, there's no drummer on here. It's just a trio of Jan Garbarek on saxophones, Nana Vasconcelos doing some voice things that he always did, and his various types of hand percussion, and the late great John Abercrombie on guitars. So no bass player, and because of the unusual lineup, Abercrombie fills a weird gap. He does some like drone things on the electric guitar, so he lays down a drone sometimes, and then he plays over it. So you've got kind of electric guitar and this hand percussion thing going on, and saxophone. It's really a great lineup, without bass and without a drum kit. Very, very evocative music. I'm surprised that somebody didn't snatch a lot of this music up to use in film, in movies or documentaries or something. It's an area I would love to see Jan Garbarek do more in and do something else like this in, because lately it seems like his records are, you know, too standardized around the rhythm section of bass, drums, keyboards type of thing. And you know, with this oddball lineup, and John Abercrombie having to adapt as he always did to the situation. Okay, there's no bass and drums thundering away. There's no piano here, so the only harmonic chordal instrument is the guitar. So John does some interesting things that he didn't do in other places where he had a real bass and drums rhythm section. Nana Vasconcelos does multiple overdubs, so this is really a studio album, and I think it's best done that way, because Nana Vasconcelos did a lot of kind of subtle hand percussion things that needed to be overdubbed, and so as a result, I really prefer his studio things. Yeah, fantastic. And again, now I have to go listen to this. I'm sorry they didn't do another one like this, even these same three guys. And now two of them are gone. John Abercrombie and Nana Vasconcelos are gone, and only Garbrick remains. This is a fact. You know, now that I think about it, I tend to forget about this. And this is one of those longer albums. This is 50 some odd minutes long, relatively long, you know, for a vinyl LP. Naturally, I have it on CD. There's a couple tracks, a couple short tracks that are duets. One with Jan Garbrick and just John Abercrombie with no percussion, and another one that's just percussion. And of course, I'm doing this from memory. Just Nana Vasconcelos percussion, no guitar, and Jan Garbrick on flutes, and that's a really cool track. But John Abercrombie also on one track plays an electric 12-string guitar, which is the only time I've ever heard him play an electric 12-string guitar. So he must have rented it, or there must have been one in the studio that he was recording in or something, and that's interesting as well, because in addition to Abercrombie working in a slightly different context than he normally does, and having to respond to that different context, he's also playing an instrument that he didn't play at all that I know of besides this one album. Highly recommend it. Adventure with an E. And again, I bet you there's a lot of stuff up on YouTube from this album. It seems like recently ECM Records, where they previously used to ban and have videos removed of their albums that were put up. It seems like not only are they allowing them to go through, but they're kind of like sponsoring them, because there's a big music distribution house that seems like they're putting up these, usually under the artist's name Topic, like Jan Garbrick Topic, or Keith Jarrett Topic, that kind of thing. You know, I think even though I don't make squat out of my releases, in a way I've made it, because there actually is a Gary Hayden Topic, and it's me. It's actually, because there's many Gary Haydens out there. But I looked it up. There's a Gary Hayden Topic that made it out there, which I guess, I don't know how that works. It's automatically generated, but there has to be enough videos out there that are identified as that person, how they get the right person when there's more than one, because there's more than one Gary Hayden out there. Yet when I look at my Gary Hayden Topic, all I see are my legitimate music things on there, and no other Gary Hayden. So I don't know how that gets filtered into there. But that's kind of cool. Does it do me any good financially? Absolutely none. So anyway, here it is, Tales from the Garage number 40, whatever it is, 44? It seems like I've been doing this for longer than 44. Of course, if the one that I did yesterday came out, it would have been 45. But so here's a great selection of records. If you can go find any of these, I put up the Thilo von Westerhagen on my own page. The Charles Lloyd Quartet Montreux 82, I don't know about. That could be out there. Keith Jarrett, Arbor Zena. And Jan Garbrick's Adventure, featuring Nana Vasconcelos and John Abercrombie. Try to listen to them. These are fantastic albums. And yeah, I had something else to say, and I can't remember what it was now. I'm sure it was about Adventure, but I can't think of what it was. As soon as I'm done recording, I will remember what it was. Okay, guys, another half-hour video. What can I do? I'm too verbose. I will be back soon, much sooner than you want me to be, and hopefully this video will come out this time. See you soon, everybody. Hope everything's going well for you. Bye-bye.
Tune in next time for more
Tales from the Garage.